can't say I remember no Aton.
Stop saying that!
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan, trapped in the TV, but I don't know it, so please don't tell me. And this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things you might have missed in episode 4 of Skeleton Crew. Guys, this is some great Star Wars. I'm loving the mystery of the show, and especially I love the characters. These kids feel like real kids and not TV kids. And every episode is just a joy to talk about. This episode also had lots of connections to the greater Star Wars saga that I'm excited to tell you about, but I also want to let you guys know that we are relaunching our live show next year as a kind of Pee-wee's Playhouse for nerds. We are bringing this new show to LA, Phoenix, Houston, Atlanta, Charlotte, Philly, and Orlando with special guests, exclusive breakdowns, in-person meet and greets, and you only get this experience at our show, and we are so excited for you guys to see it. There's a discount code in the description for 20% off, and we're going to have a special sneak peek at the end of this video. So this episode was directed by the Daniels, the directing duo who won an Academy Award for directing Everything Everywhere All at Once. Last episode we learned that Aton was one of the 9 jewels of the Old Republic, planets where the first galactic government stashed their money before that government fell at the end of the Jedi-Sith War roughly 1,000 years before this show. So in this episode, the crew of the Onyx Cinder landed at Akron thinking it's their home. And by the way...
yes, at Akron, the rubber capital of the United States.
That's Akron, Ohio. At Akron is one of those Republic jewels, but it's been destroyed. Last week I theorized that these worlds could have been destroyed by the Sith, but the Sith left Aton alone so they could use its wealth to build the Sith Eternal cult that we saw in Rise of Skywalker. So this whole premise of a crew looking for a lost planet and instead finding a ruin is a storyline that's very familiar to fans of the Battlestar Galactica reboot, which featured a similar episode in its final season. The first place they land is a ruined playground, which seems like the perfect place for kids to find in a post-apocalyptic ruin. It also reminded me of Sarah Connor's dream in Terminator 2, where the apocalypse destroys a playground in a nuclear explosion. Tara Silvati over at Screen Rant had a great observation about this planet. The name likely derives from the Greek word Acheron in ancient Greek mythology. Now that word means pain or river of woe, and it is quite literally the name of the river of Hades and the underworld. And this planet shows us that path to death and despair, endless war with no hope of peace. When they arrive, we see these giant space stations, which reminded me of the world destroyers from Operation Cinder. So this was Palpatine's contingency plan. In case he was ever deposed, he left special orders for his troops to destroy certain worlds so no one else could ever control them. So Palpatine technically could have destroyed this world, or maybe Palpatine later used ancient Sith technology for Operation Cinder. Or these could simply be space stations that maintain the cloud cover around the world. Shortly after arriving, the kids see the statue of the world's leader and call it
King No Head.
And actually, this is kind of appropriate because, as we see, the world has no leader and no real governing philosophy. It's just war for the sake of war, where your entire life boils down to one question.
What flag do you fly?
But I think this could also be symbolic of a theory we were talking about on the ScreenCrush Discord, which, by the way, is really fun and free to join. It's like the internet before the internet became awful. The links are below. So a user on our Discord named FireEye121 theorized that the planet is run by droids, and I think, honestly, this is the most likely solution to this mystery. The supervisor is likely a program that the people don't even know is not a real person. This depiction is similar to The Wizard and the Wizard of Oz, or to the classic Star Trek episode Return of the Archons, where it's revealed that the people of a planet have been secretly ruled by a computer named Landru for 6,000 years.
I am Landru.
You are a machine.
And that kind of blind loyalty and misinformation is a great metaphor for our society today. If I could just step back into the store to tell you about this for a moment. We all tend to put our heads down and blindly do our jobs, while the metaphorical barrier prevents us from paying attention to what's happening in the world.
Yeah, but I don't really know what kind of news I can even trust. Better to disengage and watch the world burn.
Yeah, I hear you. It is very easy to be overwhelmed by the news. I mean, we all tend to live in little bubbles of misinformation on the internet where the algorithm only feeds us the information that we want to hear. And of course, this all actually benefits the giant media companies that own all of these different sites, who are all just trying to up engagement for higher ad revenue. So if you guys want to cut through all that bias and hear real news, I recommend Ground News. They're the sponsor of this video. I use Ground News every day. I liked it so much I have my very own subscription. Ground News is an app and website that gathers related articles from across the world into one place, but they give you the context about the source's political leaning, their reliability, and their ownership. This means that you can see through the bias and think critically about the news that you consume. For instance, here's a story from a couple days ago about that United Healthcare CEO being shot. I can see here this has 52 sources, 17 left, 9 right, and 10 center. I can see each source, how they lean, and most importantly, who owns those sources. Now, I noticed that stories with the left lean talk about how this has shined a light on health insurance denial rates, while headlines from the right are focusing on how people on the left are celebrating the death of the CEO. Now, I also want to know that the news isn't trying to sway sway me one way or the other. So Ground News has a blind spot section that shows you news stories that both sides are ignoring. Like this audit that says only 6% of federal full-time workers show up in person, or this one that says Trump ally Tulsi Gabbard gets all of her Russian information from a Kremlin propaganda outlet. See guys, this is an incredible resource, and I've been looking for a service like Ground News for years, so I highly encourage you to check them out. If you go to ground.news/SC or click this QR code, you'll get 50% off their Vantage plan, which includes unlimited access to every feature. This is their best deal of the year, and it's only available for a limited time. Your subscription is not only going to help our channel, but you'll also be supporting an independent platform working to make the media landscape more transparent. Now, back to what I was saying. Now, after they land, Jod says something interesting.
Tastes like ashy dust. It's a lot like my home planet, actually.
Now, I love that we still don't know a lot about Jod. Like, was he a Padawan who was spared from the Purge? Is he actually Force sensitive? But this moment could be a clue. See, one ashy world that's famous in Star Wars is Mustafar, but the whole planet doesn't look like a volcano like we saw in Revenge of the Sith. In fact, the planet where Kylo Ren stole the Sith Wayfinder in Rise of Skywalker was just another part of Mustafar, and Jod could be from that part, which also looks quite ashy. You see, Mustafar is a hub in the dark side of the Force. It's where Palpatine brought Force-sensitive children that he had kidnapped during the Clone Wars. So Jod could have actually been one of those kidnapped children, who was overlooked by the Jedi and raised on Mustafar, and then became a pirate. The kids enter a home that is identical to Fern's home on Aton, including the same mural on the wall, and they enter through a door that opens and closes both vertically and horizontally, very similar to the doorways that we saw in the Death Star. KB says,
The structure is in danger of collapsing.
Which she would be able to see because of her cybernetic implants that we discussed last week. Wim immediately thinks of the most adventurous option and the least practical.
Do you think maybe we fell asleep for 100 years?
Which is describing cryogenic sleep. You know, the way space travel is depicted in franchises like Alien and Avatar. And it could be that in the ancient days of the Jedi, pre-hyperspace travel, the Jedi maybe would have placed themselves in a carbon freeze to survive long journeys through space that would take hundreds of years. So on the ship, Jod discovers Neil's holo of the circus performance from the Star Wars Holiday Special that we saw back in Episode 1. And here we get a great close-up of 33's peg leg. I love the design of this guy, like he's an old school character of a pirate. And I also want to shout out Kevin Erdman over at Screen Rant, who had a few observations about this episode that I want to share. When Wim meets Hana, he says,
Are you guys like an army of kids battling the adults for control over the planet?
Which Erdman points out is very similar to a Yoda storyline in a 2015 Star Wars comic by Jason Aaron, where Yoda visits a planet where kids are at war with the adults. The Skeleton Crew also makes many references to classic children's stories, so this line could also be a nod to the Lost Boys fighting Captain Hook and Peter Pan, or even to kids trying to govern an island by themselves in Lord of the Flies. Later we find out that 33's memory was erased to keep the planet's existence a secret, which is also very similar to the robot Ben from Treasure Planet, who was kind of like a living treasure map. And while I'm talking about Treasure Planet, shout out to one of the all-time smoothest transitions in the history of film.
Made one's spirit soar.
Outside the ship, I love the detail that 33 was able to see the troops in the fog before Jod was.
Yeah, I remember warriors like these.
The kids hide from this patrol, very Return of the King, inside of a school bus. Now notice here we see a ruined version of the RX droid from the Star Tours ride that drove the bus on Aton. So this carries on the episode's theme of showing perversions of the kids' peaceful life on their homeworld. Wim, like, dreams of this life of excitement, but here he sees what that would actually mean. A world where his boring school is now a training ground for child soldiers.
I mean, he wants to be a Jedi, and that's what the Jedi Temple is.
You are right. But this also shows us the stakes of the series. This is what could happen to their peaceful space suburbs if Aton was discovered and raided by pirates. At the base, we see the same species that were present on Aton. Humans, Rhodians, Ithorians, Vizuans, Neil species, and this one's your mom. Also, don't forget everybody, we are always creating new Star Wars parody merch at our merch store. Right now, we have Grogu, Boop, and a Rancor. Evil will always triumph because good is dumb. Lots of MCU parody designs, and brand new hoodies of original trilogy and somehow Palpatine returned. We're always creating new deals, new bundles, new shirts, so subscribe to our newsletter or check out our links below for more info. The great Twitter account Veers Watch pointed out this helmet, an honest to goodness helmet that looks exactly like the one General Veers wore while he was in an AT-AT. So the training sequence was a lot of fun and gave us a couple of neat Easter eggs and a good character insight. This is where we see that Neil is completely useless in a fight.
He totally beat me, even though he's about half my size.
But as Hana says later in the episode, his kindness is not a weakness, it is his strength.
I'm the strongest man in the world.
The only way for this world to truly heal is if the people become the kind of society that shares its food instead of hoarding it. But as Kevin Erdman at Screen Rant points out, this scene where Wim changes his blaster setting is also significant in the Star Wars canon. So this feature was first described in the novelization of A New Hope published in 1976, but we didn't see it in live action until The Mandalorian Season 1. So I wonder if we're actually seeing it here to foreshadow that in later episodes the kids can get hit with blasters and not like immediately die. The main conflict on the planet in this episode at least centers on one faction stealing a herd of Eopies. Now we first saw these creatures on Tatooine in The Phantom Menace, where they gave us our first fart joke of the saga. This was also the same creature that Obi-Wan rode at the end of Revenge of the Sith and in the first season of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Now when they go off into battle, I noticed that the symbol of heinous forces is a circle composed of 7 other circles. Now this is very similar to the circular pattern that we saw on the mural of Aton, but also similar to the configuration of the 9 planets that we saw on the scrolls last episode. Now I only point out that it's similar because I think what we're seeing here is the way symbols change and evolve over time until they take on entirely new meanings. It's a nice addition to flesh out the culture of this planet, to show how much it's changed from Aton over the years. It's also very similar to the show Silo, but I don't want to get into any spoilers for that show. If you've seen it, then you know what I'm talking about. You should really watch Silo. Also, the score at this moment sounds very much like the THX logo. Now, I only mention this because THX was also created by George Lucas, and this show is filled with reference to George Lucas creations like American Graffiti, THX 1138, and Indiana Jones. Then Jod returns the Eopie, cementing him as a hero in the eyes of the kids, and for the audience.
We're saved!
But the real danger of this show is that these kids are in way over their heads and they're away from home. And you know the first rule that parents teach their kids?
Do not eat chicken bones off the ground.
No, don't talk to strangers.
Unless they have chicken bones.
No, kids don't talk to strangers even if they have chicken bones. Anyways, the kids in this show are relying on 2 strangers, 33 and Jod Nana Wood, and neither of them can actually be fully trusted, which is why I always have a sense of unease when I watch this show. So then the kids finally get to the Fallen Archive, aka the Supervisor's Tower, and notice this is the first time in the episode that we actually see some daylight, a subtle way of telling the audience, hey, everything's gonna be okay, you are safe, which of course is setting us up for the terrifying reversal at the end of the episode with 33. Now here I want to shout out to one of our Discord users named Birdie, who pointed out that the tower resembles East Berlin's television tower.
Oh, appropriate, since the structure of Aton society seems to be an ideal communist utopia.
What?
Chicken bones.
So Birdie went on to point out that the city's design is very brutalist, and that brutalism is an architectural style that was strongly associated with communism in European countries from the mid-1960s to the late 80s. And, also according to Google AI summary of this, that style was often promoted by its designers who were influenced by socialist utopian ideas. In the tower, the different worlds' coordinates are arranged in a circle, much like a key scene in the Battlestar Galactica reboot, when the crew find coordinates for the 13 colonies arranged in a circular shrine. So we learned some of the other planet names are At-Atu, At-Arissa, At-Aravan, and At-Akoda.
So why do they all start with At?
Well, I think it could kind of be like the word al in Arabic, which means the, and it's the part of the root word for words like algebra and alchemy. In this case, the planets could have been named from a more ancient language where At just means the, or it could just be like a way to name a place, you know, just like the word at in English. So then they discover that the coordinates for Aton have been destroyed. Fern has a crisis of confidence.
I have no idea what I'm doing.
Now, I think this pressure was very triggering for her because she would get a lot of pressure from her mom to always be the smartest person in her class. But then she remembers how she tricked her nanny droid back in episode 1.
Run memory override. Yes, I was. You just didn't see me.
And she uses the same trick on 33.
I'm your captain. Run memory override.
And then we learned the dark truth behind 33 and the Onyx cylinder.
It was in this very room. The captain killed any of his crew that saw the coordinates to Aton.
Now, that old pirate story is exactly what we hear in the Goonies when Mikey tells the story of One-Eyed Willie.
And then you know what he did? He killed all of his men. Why? Why'd he kill all of them? Well, because he didn't want them to get to his treasure.
But these are both taken from the story of Treasure Island, where Captain Flint killed his crew to keep the treasure location safe. And then he says,
If anyone ever comes poking around looking for the treasure.
Which reminded me of this line from Biff Tannen in Back to the Future 2 when Marty asked him about the Sports Almanac.
He said someday a crazy, wild-eyed scientist or a kid may show up asking about that book. And if that ever happens,
And then, how terrifying was 33's heel turn? The way he grows and extends himself was like the Empire's EXT droids that we saw in Star Wars Rebels. They were kind of just basic looking until it was time to kill. Notice the camera is locked on 33 with a fisheye lens to create this uncomfortable, distorted feeling, similar to the shot of Evelyn jumping through realities in the Daniels Everything Everywhere All at Once. But I think this camera choice was most likely influenced by these horrifying rig shots in Darren Aronofsky's Requiem for a Dream. Remember, we also saw a similar fisheye lens shot from C-3PO's point of view when he was looking at Anakin in The Phantom Menace. Now, notice how Wim and KB immediately hide behind Fern. It's very sweet. But then, brave little Neil channels Neville Longbottom and shows courage.
Hey! Leave him alone!
I'll fight you!
And when he fainted, I genuinely laughed out loud. Well guys, that was another fun ScreenCrush video for another perfect day here in the ScreenCrush universe. Gosh, I love you guys, I love our fans, and I love my job.
Yeah, it sure is great being us.
Hey, that's ScreenCrush and Ryan Airy. You see, I, Paul from the Heavy Spoilers channel, I also hate small dogs because obviously I'm a bad person. Now I know something that's really gonna get them. I'm gonna send them to a far away, far distant city where they can never come back. I'm sending them to
Los Angeles, California.
Well, I don't know, boss. That seems kind of mean.
Shut up or I'll give you a fresh one. Now activate the Destructo Beam.
That's right, the ScreenCrush store is going to come to a city near you where we're going to bring you special guests, exclusive breakdowns, one-on-one fan meetups, and fan Q&As. Will me and Doug find our way home, or will Heavy Spoilers succeed in destroying our very way of life? Come to the live show to find out what happens next. So guys, that's all the Easter eggs we caught in Skeleton Crew Episode 4. If you found any, let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.